Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of The Book of Strange New Things by Michel Faber. This is a standalone literary fiction story that takes place in a sci-fi setting. This follows our main character of Peter, and he is a non-denominational Christian missionary that is chosen by this company that has sort of taken over everything space travel. It's set in the near future, but it's this company that is in charge of this one planet that there's not really much hint about what exactly they're doing on it, but the natives of that planet have basically demanded a Christian missionary, and so he is sent there to be a missionary to these people. And in this process, he has to leave his wife Beatrice, and they are a very close couple, and this obviously challenges their relationship, and everything kind of goes from there. So this is one of the books that I've had on my shelf since, I believe, 2015. It's one of the books that's been on my TBR the longest, and one I definitely knew I wanted to get read. So when I ended up DNFing another of my Tome Topple reads, I picked this one up. So first off, we talk about the world building. As I mentioned in my synopsis, this is definitely a literary fiction story that takes place in a science fiction world. I wouldn't necessarily categorize this as science fiction, even though it does have science fiction elements. It definitely reads more like a literary fiction than a sci-fi. So with that, there is this world that they're on that they refer to as Oasis, and there are some like science-y type things happening, but again, not much explanation of them, which is why, again, I don't really feel like it's a sci-fi. The biggest sci-fi thing is the native people, who are sort of described as like very short in stature, not really having a face that can translate at all into like a human face, and that are just like very difficult to look at. And they have more of a primitive way of living, but then throughout the story it also shows that they're not exactly primitive, they're just adapted to their surroundings. And then you do get a lot of explanation of the planet, which is a very barren landscape with not a lot of animals at all, and nothing that you could really compare to our world, and very few things to eat. So they have a food, for example, that's made out of like this one plant, and you can turn that into basically anything. So there's those little elements that are sort of sci-fi-ish, but again, if you go into this, I implore you to go into it as a literary fiction. Next, I'm gonna talk about our characters. So our main character of Peter is a early 30s Christian missionary, non-denominational, so that was done very well, but I think you'd only have a real deep appreciation for this if you grew up with Christianity as a background. For example, I went to Christian schools growing up. I am not myself religious now, but this type of person was interesting to read about because he actually is like pretty decent person. Like, he definitely doesn't condone a lot of things that really awful Christians condone, as far as like really horrible behavior. Like, his whole thing is like, he's like, I love everyone, and because Jesus loved everyone, and all of that kind of stuff. So that was well done, but I expected him to be challenged more in his religion throughout, and I kind of feel like he wasn't, which is part of the reasons why I wanted to read this book. I thought going into this book that he was going to have his faith questioned a little bit more, and that he was going to question his faith a little bit more. And I like some of those stories when people kind of decide their own morals outside of a code that a religion or that society gives them. So I didn't get that, which was disappointing, but that was something that I thought of myself that I was going to get. So it's not quite the book's fault, but I'm still a little mad at the book for it. And then he just appears very naive throughout the story, and that was grating. The first half I liked a lot more than the second half, because again, he goes from being sort of likable naive to just kind of like irritating and grating, and he just makes these bad choices, but then kind of backs up what he's doing with his like religion a bit, and just some things aren't quite answered with what he does as well, which I'll get to in the plot. As far as Beatrice, she's a character that we get to see a lot more. That's his wife. We get to see her a lot more through his letters that he's sending her, and she is having more of a crisis of faith, which is an interesting pull on their relationship, because she was the one that originally brought him to Christianity. So it's interesting to kind of see those two characters and their dynamic, but I was wanting more of that, because I feel like, again, the synopsis sort of is like, this is an exploration of a relationship that's being challenged by space and time. And for the most part, there's just a lot of Peter with the natives and with the people that he's working with on this base, and less exploration of their relationship. There's some flashbacks, there's some things in the letters, but overall I don't really feel like I have a really good grasp on their relationship. There are a number of other characters as far as like the native people that you sort of get to know, but he refers to them all because they refer to themselves as Jesus lovers. So it's like Jesus lover 16, Jesus lover 37, like that's how they refer to themselves. and that's kind of hard obviously to get to know them as characters. And then the people on the base are kind of interesting because basically they have to be really good at a certain skill and also not have any connections at home. So he is one of the only characters that really still has that connection to home, and so there's a sense of like unease throughout the story that I wasn't quite expecting there to be, because there's just like a certain kind of like wrongness to the base, and not anything like sinister, but just like the people there don't have attachments to anything, and he is struggling with his attachment to both the native people and to his wife, and so like that dynamic is really compelling. And then he also forms a interesting relationship with one of the other characters on base that's human, and that is also another way where I'm like, when that relationship started to develop, it gave me more discomfort. So yeah, this book overall left me a little bit uncomfortable. As far as the plot, this is very just like winding and slow, and again, not what I quite expected, because I was expecting more sort of challenge of religion than I got. I expected more of a sort of satisfying conclusion. I'm not completely upset with this book for the conclusion, but I definitely felt like there's a lot of questions that weren't really wrapped up as far as the effect of the world on people, which is hinted at throughout the story, that never really quite gets explained or wrapped up, and his relationship and all of these kinds of things just aren't really explained also throughout the story. And I find that this happens a lot with like literary fiction male writers. There's a lot of just like mention, especially later on in the story, of like male genitalia, semen, like just stuff that I'm just like, comparing things to used condoms, where I'm just like, I don't feel that this is the only way you need to describe things, you know? Like, I feel like you could use something less phallic as a description. You don't need to do this, but you are, because men love to talk about penises. So that was just a little odd. But the writing overall, besides those bits, I did like. Do I think I would necessarily go for another book of his? Probably not, but I'll talk about that later, because I'm going to talk about in another video my realization that I don't really love literary fiction that much, and that's okay. So overall, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I think if you're somebody that really likes literary fiction, you probably would like this, especially if you like literary fiction that just has like a dash of genre fiction mixed in. I'm a person that loves genre fiction with a dash of literary fiction mixed into my genre fiction. So like literary fantasy or literary sci-fi, but this is more of just literary fiction with a dash of sci-fi mixed in. So comment below, let me know what you thought of the Book of Strange New Things. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.